He was the first international reggae star bringing Jamaican culture to the world. He was a symbol of hope, the voice that lifted an entire nation out of the shadows of poverty. And he was Jimmy Cliff, a heart that never stopped beating for his audience. But even a shining light like Jimmy Cliff could not escape fate. On November 24, 2025, Jimmy Cliff appeared in the headlines with the words, "has passed away," and millions of hearts around the globe collapsed. Jamaica cried, Africa cried, the whole world broke into tears. Yet in that very moment of solemn tribute, a chilling detail emerged, a sealed forensic report, and a truth that could change the way we look at his death. What happened in the last 24 hours of Jimmy Cliff's life? Why did the body of such a powerful icon collapse so suddenly and so suspiciously? All the truth will be revealed in this video. Do not miss it. Jamaica, the 1940s and 1950s, where poverty was a sentence and hope was a luxury. James Chambers was born on July 30, 1944, in the rural town of Somerton, St. James, Jamaica. He grew up among the sighs of the poor, no shoes to wear. Meals sometimes were nothing more than a few steamed yams. From a young age, Chambers already faced his first and greatest heartbreak. His mother left too soon. His father, a tailor and small farmer, was the one who raised him. But in the midst of that hardship, he was blessed with the greatest gift: music. At 8 years old, while other children played without worry, James was already creating his first melodies, using empty paint cans and old wooden tabletops. As he entered his teenage years, life in Somerton slowly became a suffocating cage. At 14, an age when most kids were still in school or helping their families, James dropped out and followed his father to Kingston to seek opportunity. But Kingston was a cultural shock, a crowded capital where children like James had to fight to survive. A tiny rented room in the slum's moldy walls. At night, James curled up listening to gunshot screams and police chasing criminals. It was in the back alleys of Kingston where Jimmy Cliff's spirit of resistance was truly shaped. He saw firsthand the police's injustice against black people, corruption, and the cruelty of discrimination. These experiences turned his music into a weapon. Chambers realized that stories of pain and struggle were what the people needed to hear. He did not sing about romantic love. He sang about harsh reality and revolutionary hope. Chambers began calling himself Jimmy Cliff, with Cliff symbolizing the peak he longed to reach. From that moment on, the suffering James Chambers disappeared, and the legend of Jimmy Cliff began his journey to conquer the world. The first steps into music. A voice tested by fate. One afternoon, James stopped in front of the small ice cream shop and recording space owned by Leslie Kong, a Chinese Jamaican living in Kingston. He ran a little ice cream and music shop, where street musicians often came by. James quietly walked in and sang a song he wrote himself called "Dearest Beverly," his voice trembling with fear, unsure if he was worthy. But as the melody filled the room, Kong's eyes changed. He said, "You've got something special." Just 1 year later, in 1962, James released his very first single under the name Jimmy Cliff Hurricane Hattie. The song was named after the hurricane that had just devastated Belize, symbolizing pain, rebirth, and hope. It became Jimmy's first hit. It was a moment of destiny. After Hurricane Hattie, Jimmy didn't sleep on that small victory. He continued working, recording, auditioning, writing. With singles like King of Kings, Miss Jamaica, Dearest Beverly, he gradually earned his place in the local music scene. In 1964, in his early 20s, Jimmy was chosen to represent Jamaica at the World's Fair in New York. It was the first time a voice from Jamaica rang out under international lights. He saw white audiences, black audiences, people of every shade dancing together to his rhythm. For the first time, Jimmy realized that music had no borders. And from there, the journey to bring reggae to the world began. From dusty alleyways, Jimmy Cliff started dreaming of the stage of humanity. A young artist determined to carry Jamaica's music across the Atlantic Ocean. Global fame, the trailblazer of reggae. Reggae once existed only as the sound of cramped Kingston slums, a style the upper class looked down on, the press ignored, and the world had never taken seriously. Jimmy Cliff didn't wait for anyone's approval. He took the music to tiny clubs, tiny studios, makeshift stages, and then the world began to listen. When Wonderful World Beautiful People was released for the first time, American and European audiences were stunned to discover that an artist from that little island was singing for all humanity. No anger, no complaints, just a simple call that struck deep into the heart. This world is beautiful. We are just forgetting how to love each other. Wonderful World Beautiful People became one of the first reggae songs to appear on international charts, paving the way for reggae to step outside Jamaica. After this track, audiences in the United States, Europe, Australia began turning to reggae not as some tropical oddity, but as music with a universal message. With Wonderful World Beautiful People, Jimmy brought reggae from Kingston streets to international radio, opening the door for a global music movement. Are you playing Wonderful World Beautiful People right now? Listen to it like the breath of a nation, like the declaration of a man who rose from nothing. But Jimmy did not stop there. Lead role in The Harder They Come, 1972. The true turning point for global reggae only came when Jimmy Cliff took the lead role in the film The Harder They Come, 1972. His character, Ivan, a man from the ghettos living at the bottom of society, oppressed and cast aside, reflected Jimmy's own journey. The film wasn't a Hollywood blockbuster, not a spectacle of glamorous lights. It was raw, heavy, but real down to every breath. When the first notes of the soundtrack played with many rivers to cross global audiences, realized this wasn't just music. It was the voice of the oppressed seeking freedom. Hunger, pain, the dream to survive, all fused into trembling yet powerful vocals, guitars, and drums. The movie and its soundtrack became the gateway that opened reggae to the world. After The Harder They Come, reggae was no longer a borderline genre, but stepped into the center of global pop culture. Jimmy, with his pure tenor voice and deeply human emotion, became an unofficial ambassador, putting reggae not only in people's ears, but in their hearts. Many international artists from the United States, Europe, and Africa began to listen, cover, and create music under reggae's influence. The path from Kingston's ghettos to the world stage was first carved by Jimmy Cliff, using nothing but his voice, his courage, and his unshakable belief in music. Throughout a career spanning more than 6 decades, Jimmy Cliff recorded over 30 albums and kept working, releasing new music well into recent years. But international success did not bring peace, it only brought judgment. By pushing reggae beyond Jamaica's borders, Jimmy paid a heavy price: skepticism from the very community that created him. A star in controversy, innovation, or betrayal. The dangerous compromise: commercial reggae. After the explosion of The Harder They Come, Jimmy Cliff faced enormous pressure from Western record labels. They wanted a more accessible, more marketable version of reggae. Cliff began blending reggae with elements of pop, R&B, and soul, creating what critics called commercial reggae. In 1988, he released the album Hanging Fire, widely recognized as one of his clearest efforts to fuse reggae with the pop soul trends of the time. One newspaper described the album as reggae walking the line between Jamaican folk roots and mainstream pop. But in Jamaica, the reaction was completely different. Many reggae fans saw the songs as diluting and betraying the rough traditional sound of the genre. Some critics and fans said, "The sound is too clean. The lyrics make reggae lose its grit, its dirt, the very things that give it life." Jimmy Cliff believed he was expanding reggae's boundaries. But to the purists, he was selling out its message and rhythm for personal gain, trading artistry for money. From the hero who brought reggae to the world, Jimmy Cliff suddenly became the center of controversy in the very place he came from. And that was the most painful part. The religious battle. Not authentic enough reggae is not just music. For many, it is faith, a cultural bloodstream, a belief system. And to most original reggae followers, embracing the Rastafari movement is a crucial requirement to be considered pure reggae. While Bob Marley was deeply tied to Rastafari and viewed as a prophet of freedom, Jimmy Cliff chose a different path. This became a critical weakness in the battle for the reggae crown. Jimmy Cliff converted to Islam. In a world where reggae is closely linked with Rastafarian philosophy, Cliff, being a Muslim, made him appear not authentic enough in the eyes of many traditional reggae fans. Some looked at him with doubt, even disdain. How can someone who doesn't follow Rastafari bring spiritual fire into reggae? Reggae must be black blood dirt Rastafari. If not, it's pop, not reggae. To them, Cliff became a symbol of being not original, too foreign, too gentle to fully embody the soul of Jamaica. His music, no matter how captivating or global, was questioned for lacking the true identity of reggae. If this religious controversy was a blade from his own community, then the greatest tragedy of Jimmy Cliff's career was this: he was never truly evaluated for who he was. Crushing pressure. From comparison. The shadow named Marley. When Bob Marley reached a global peak, becoming the king of reggae, the symbol of freedom, spirituality, and social revolution, every conversation about reggae revolved around his name. No one asked anymore, who paved the way for reggae to be known worldwide? They only asked, where does Marley stand at the top? And Jimmy Cliff, the man who built the foundation, who sparked the cultural explosion with The Harder They Come, suddenly became the second the follower, the one who didn't do reggae as purely as Marley. Some even said bluntly, Cliff used to be number one, but Marley is the one who made reggae immortal. Is there anything more painful for a pioneer? Imagine this: an artist who risked everything to pull reggae out of poverty's shadows. But when reggae finally shined, the spotlight was on someone else. Jimmy Cliff understood his worth. The pressure to constantly prove himself, to fight against the shadow of a friend, was a crushing burden. A psychological battle so heavy that anyone weaker might have collapsed. Jimmy Cliff, the man who took reggae to the world and ignited the cultural blast of The Harder They Come, was turned on by a portion of the reggae community branded a sellout and commercial, simply because he dared to succeed in his own way. This controversy was not just about music. It was about identity, loyalty, and the cost of innovation within a community fighting to protect its heritage. Jimmy Cliff, who once fought injustice and industry manipulation, chose a completely different path in his personal life. Privacy, stability, and absolute devotion to family, a battleground, where he learned painful lessons from a childhood marked by abandonment. Personal life and family. A solid Cliff in his private world. Jimmy Cliff's relationship with his wife, Laverna Hart, has lasted for decades and became a peaceful harbor amid the storms of his career. She is American, known as either a lawyer or an activist in human rights and cultural causes. Her work, though not publicly highlighted, reflected the same philosophy of social justice that Jimmy Cliff always pursued. Although Jimmy Cliff is a national treasure of Jamaica, he spent most of his life in the United States, often in the Los Angeles or New York area. This allowed him to better protect his privacy, far from the relentless scrutiny of Jamaican media. Jimmy Cliff has 4 children, and he has always emphasized nurturing both their talent and character. His 2 most recognized children are Aisha Cliff and Jude Cliff. Aisha Cliff is a documentary filmmaker and social activist carrying on her father's fight for justice through educational and cultural projects. Jude Cliff followed in his father's footsteps, becoming a musician and producer. He not only supports his father's projects, but also builds his own career deeply influenced by reggae, pop, and other styles. Jimmy Cliff ensured that his children grew up with a deep understanding of their Jamaican roots, while receiving Western education and opportunities. It was his way of repairing the hardships he suffered in his own impoverished childhood. For a man who turned personal pain into anthems for humanity, music was not a job, it was survival. Even at an older age, he proved the flame of reggae in his heart never dimmed. Most Hollywood legends, after enduring betrayal and ruthless comparisons, choose to rest and enjoy what they built. But not Jimmy Cliff. A lifelong love for music, a flame of hope that never dies. Even after decades on this earth, Jimmy Cliff remains a powerhouse of energy and creativity. While his contemporaries gradually stepped away from the spotlight, Jimmy Cliff continued a demanding schedule of global tours. He brought messages of peace and resilience to major stages across Europe, Africa, and the biggest music festivals in the United States. When he stepped on stage, age vanished. His powerful steps, bright smile, and vibrant voice still shook audiences. He wasn't simply performing, he was igniting a new generation. Jimmy Cliff did not stop at performing his old hits. He continued creating new music, proving that the world still needed his voice. His album Rebirth 2012 was a powerful comeback and earned the prestigious Grammy Award for Best Reggae Album, a triumphant victory for perseverance. His track Refugees 2022, released at an advanced age, spoke about the global refugee crisis. His recent songs still focused on struggle, hope, and social justice. Jimmy Cliff came full circle, continuing to deliver the message of human rights he began in the 1960s. He remained the voice of the oppressed, proving that truth has no age. In his final interviews, he often spoke about his bond with reggae. Reggae is my bloodstream. If I stop singing, I die. After decades of being labeled the one who paved the way, instead of the leader, the later years of Jimmy Cliff's career finally brought deserved legacy. Jimmy Cliff was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 2010. It was more than a personal honor, it was official recognition that he is one of the most influential figures in shaping global rock and pop, breaking genre boundaries. Jimmy Cliff never became the king of reggae the Western media wanted. He became something greater, an immortal symbol of resilience, a man who proved that true art cannot be defeated by time or forgotten by history. For more than 6 decades, Jimmy Cliff stood strong against the storms of the industry, harsh criticism, and bitter betrayal. He sang, he fought, he crossed many rivers to cross with unbreakable resilience. But in the end, even the greatest icons must bow to the unforgiving laws of human life. The final 24 hours, his last stand against death. The forensic report, the fateful night. According to the family's announcement on November 24, 2025, Jimmy Cliff suffered a seizure, just once but enough to trigger a tragic chain acute pneumonia. After that, his condition rapidly worsened. The medical team and his family did not release specific clinical details. But at 81 years old, after nearly a century of relentless work and artistic devotion, many understood that his body had reached its limit. A life spent singing, performing, and giving everything to bring reggae from Kingston's ghettos to the world now seemed to turn against him. His family, his wife Latifah Chambers, wrote in a statement to the public, "My husband has crossed over due to a seizure followed by pneumonia. There were no calls for help, no loud medical campaigns, just a world praying and holding its breath." As doctors fought to keep him alive, his family, his wife and children stayed by his bedside. Cold hospital lights machines pumping and beeping, counting each second. No audience, no stage spotlight. Instead, the songs that followed Jimmy throughout his life. Many rivers. To cross you can get it. If you really want Vietnam. Music played softly throughout the room like a lullaby. A final farewell. Doctors could do no more. No medicine was strong enough. And Jimmy quietly took his last breath. No noise, no shocking announcements. Just one final note falling and its echo lasting forever. If there is a heaven for music, Jimmy walked into it with a smile. Jimmy Cliff's death wasn't just a loss for the music world. It was the loss of a teacher, a man who showed humanity how to rise again after being knocked down. The world's reaction was a late but heartfelt acknowledgement of his true greatness. The world says goodbye, tears across continents. Jamaica weeps his homeland. Jamaica was swallowed by a grief unlike anything they had felt before. Jamaicans didn't hold a typical funeral. They held a celebration of life. Thousands flooded the streets of Kingston, where Jimmy Cliff once walked barefoot to dance and sing his music through tears. They brought old speakers, vinyl records, smartphones blasting reggae from many rivers. To cross to you can get it if you really want. These melodies echoed through the silence, blending with sighs, sobs, and whispered prayers, as if the entire city of Kingston was crying, choking on farewells to its beloved son. Not long after the Jamaican government declared a temporary national mourning period, all public buildings lowered volume. The national radio broadcast reggae non-stop for 24 hours. The Prime Minister delivered a tribute calling him a cultural giant, an ambassador without a crown, the man who brought Jamaica's music to all of humankind. It wasn't only Jamaica. In London, Paris, New York, Lagos, São Paulo. Everywhere reggae once shook the air, radio stations turned up the volume on his songs. Streaming platforms saw numbers skyrocket from his biggest hits to the deep cuts few remembered. Many rivers. To cross you can get it. If you really want Vietnam echoed everywhere once again. People didn't simply listen, they remembered. They cried. They sang for him. They revived hope, the hunger for freedom, and the belief in a better world, just as Jimmy had dreamed since the first day he held a microphone. The legacy left behind: $1 million empire and eternal music rights. After a lifetime battling the exploitation of record labels, Jimmy Cliff didn't just reclaim respect, he reclaimed control of his own wealth. What he left behind was not only cash value, but a music rights empire built on perseverance. Although Jimmy Cliff was always private about his finances, his estimated net worth reflects decades of global success and his ownership of critical copyrights. His net worth is estimated at around 20 to 25 million USD. A major share of that comes from publishing and royalties, his most valuable assets. Unlike many reggae artists who lost ownership of their music, Jimmy Cliff fought to retain publishing rights for classics like Many Rivers to Cross the Harder They Come and Wonderful World, Beautiful People. These songs generate massive passive income every time they are played, streamed, licensed for film, or covered by other artists. Even in his 80s, he maintained an international touring schedule with ticket sales still contributing significantly thanks to loyal fans worldwide. In the early years of his career, he was severely exploited by producers and labels. Those painful experiences turned him into a sharp negotiator later on. He learned to protect his rights legally. He held crucial contracts related to the Harder They Come soundtrack. Each time the movie is re-released or its soundtrack licensed, a significant portion of the revenue flows directly into his estate. His assets are expected to be placed in a trust to protect the music rights and provide financial stability for his children, Aisha, Jude, and the others for generations to come. That ensures his children will continue benefiting from the legacy of their father's songs. When death does not silence the soul, it only makes the echo louder. Jimmy Cliff's passing was not just the loss of a man. It was the loss of a musical giant, a cultural symbol, a heartbeat of Jamaica, and of all humanity that believes in peace, justice, and freedom. But the beauty, the soul he left, cannot die. It lives forever in every note, every voice, every heart that still believes in liberation. And when you press play on any reggae song, today know this, that music once saved a man's life. And now that music is what keeps his memory alive. The last note has fallen, but the echo of Jimmy Cliff has never stopped. The legacy of Jimmy Cliff, immortal in the rivers of music. Jimmy Cliff ended his life's journey on November 24, 2025 at the age of 81, but his music did not. And the world must acknowledge one truth: if Jamaica has a soul, that soul carries the reggae rhythm of Jimmy Cliff. Before Jimmy Cliff, reggae belonged only to Jamaica. After him, reggae belonged to the world. He was the first artist to break geographic boundaries, bringing reggae to the stages of Europe, America, Africa, and making global audiences fall in love with Jamaica without ever stepping foot there. A poor boy achieved what an entire nation never dared to dream, turning Jamaica's music into the universal language of humanity. Jimmy Cliff sang for the poor, the abandoned, the oppressed, for broken hearts. Songs like Vietnam, Many Rivers to Cross You Can Get It, If You Really Want became human rights anthems recognized across the globe. He wasn't only loved by audiences. Jimmy Cliff was honored by history, a member of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame 2010. He earned prestigious Grammy Awards, and he received the Order of Merit, Jamaica's highest honor for the arts. That is not a music award. It is a medal for lifting an entire culture high. Today, young reggae artists see him as a path. The oppressed see him as hope. Jamaica sees him as eternal pride. The world sees him as the voice of freedom. If Jimmy Cliff's story moved you, if his music ever helped you through dark days, leave a tribute in the comments. Like and subscribe so you never miss the emotional stories of world icons and the hidden truths behind legends.
All data, analysis, and commentary in this video are presented based on information available at the time of production. The content is subject to change over time and should not be considered a definitive forecast.
There is still so much more to explore: stories of resilience, legacy, and truth. Feel free to dive into some of our top recommended videos now appearing on your screen.